Good afternoon. I would like to start by recognising that the interim report is a substantial and comprehensive document. I want to thank Justice Hayne and his team for their rigour, their diligence and their relentless pursuit of the truth. I want also to thank everyone who has provided evidence to the Commission and assisted them thus far. This report makes some shocking findings. Our banks have failed in many ways. Failed customers, failed to obey the law and failed to meet community standards. And all of these failures are totally unacceptable. Too many customers have been hurt and it has to stop. Too many customers want to see a much better deal from their banks. Australians have every right to expect the world's best banks. It is clear today that as an industry we have failed to deliver that. Make no mistake, today is a day of shame for Australia's banks. Having lost the trust of the Australian people, we must now do whatever it takes to earn that trust back. Banks accept full responsibility for their failures, and right now in every bank people are working day and night to make things right for their customers, to move from a selling culture to a service culture. There is much more work to be done in every bank, but every bank is determined to find the problems, to fix them and to pay back every penny. All Australians need strong and stable banks, but more importantly, every Australian deserves a fair and trustworthy bank. This report is the first step to building the banks that Australians deserve. All banks will now take the time to examine the report in detail and do all that must be done to make things right. Banks will in time be making a submission that addresses the questions in the report and providing that as requested to the Royal Commission. Thank you.
Ms Bligh, the ABA initially was not in support of a Royal Commission. Is this embarrassing for these findings to come out today and for you to have to make those remarks you just did?
There is nothing in this report for banks to feel proud of. Banks understand that many things have been revealed in the Royal Commission because of the powers that a commission has that they did not expect. And I think every Australian, including many of those who work in banks, have been not only surprised by some of what has been revealed, but very disappointed.
Do you think the directors of these banks will ever be trusted again?
The Australian banks have a big challenge ahead of them. Their job now is to work to do everything possible to find the problems and fix them, to learn the lessons, to repay every penny, and importantly to work to earn the trust of Australians back again. This country needs a banking system that everyone trusts. It's critical to the economy and it's critical to the well-being and happiness of every Australian. They want to be able to trust their banks, and banks need to be trustworthy for them.
What should have the ABA been doing all these years?
I think there is questions here for every part of the system, including industry associations like the ABA. The Commission has asked literally hundreds of policy questions in this report. We will go through it in detail. Where there are lessons to be learned, we will learn them. Where there are tasks to be done, we will undertake them.
This is only an interim report. What's the risk, do you think, of the government implementing so many regulations that it actually holds back the banking system?
Interestingly, the Commissioner has commented that in some cases it may be part of the remedy to simplify the regulations so that it is abundantly clear in a very complex system to every member of staff what their obligations are. Those are the sorts of questions that I think the industry needs to look at, banks need to comment on, the public should take a view on, and I would expect we will see regulators and the government consider.
And what about the risks of that though? If there's greater regulation, what's the chance that is passed on to customers? Are customers facing the risk of higher costs for changes to be made?
As banks go through this report and consider it in every detail, we will be looking at it through the eyes of a customer. and we will be certainly highlighting to the Commission, where necessary, if any of the proposals could have an unintended consequence for lending systems and for customers. But I think it's too early to make any assumptions about that. The report's been out for about an hour. It's a very substantial document. It's been put together with a great deal of care and rigour and thought, and it deserves a thoughtful, considered response.
Is there a real risk of higher costs though? We just see the banks have all just raised their lending rates independent of the Reserve Bank. If this leads to higher regulation, then that's higher costs for customers down the track, isn't it?
I think it's premature at this stage, I think, to be speculating about what regulations might come out of this report. The Commissioner has invited the public, including banks and government and regulator and people who have experience with their banks, to make comments on their ideas, and that's what we'll be doing. And I think, as I said, it's a bit premature to speculate about what the outcome of all that might be.
What role does the ABA have when it comes to that behaviour of the banks?
Every bank will need to examine this report individually for what it means for their bank, but I think it's critical that banks come together as a whole industry and also consider how to lift standards right across the industry, not only in their own bank, but working to lift standards and to standardise behaviour where that is possible.
How do you think we got to this position? I mean, have banks been sort of put up on a mantle for too long? Obviously, it was a great source of strength during the GFC. What led to this sort of culture?
Australians have a very strong and stable banking system. What they need, and more importantly what they deserve, is a banking system that is fair and one that they believe is trustworthy. The Commission in this report raises a number of questions about how the circumstances that led to this behaviour might have come about. I leave it to others to make a judgment about the Commission's conclusions in that regard.
Ms. Bligh, you said the system, the industry needs to change. How's the ABA going to change? What's your role in the future of the banking system in Australia?
The role of the Australian Banking Association is to work with all of our member banks to find the appropriate standards that will apply across the whole industry. Australians want to know that it doesn't matter what colour door they go through when they go into a bank, that there are certain minimum standards that will apply, and that those standards will be something that are guaranteed to them regardless of which bank. And that's what is delivered through the Banking Code of Practice overseen by the ABA. But if there are further matters that can be included in that code to improve it, to make it stronger, then that's certainly something we would look at taking on board.
Do you agree that greed is at the heart of your industry?
I think the Commission has made some very tough, strong statements about banks today, and he certainly hasn't shied away from acknowledging that the very human factor of greed may well have played a part. There are other matters that he's also considered, but there is no place for greed in the Australian banking system, and lessons have to be learnt about how to put together a system and a bank in every case that is ethical, that is trustworthy, and that customers can have confidence in.
Just two more.
What about the balance of shareholders? The Australian banks are owned by, Australian retail shareholders plus overseas. They rely on profitability. How do they strike the balance between customer service, keeping costs down, but also delivering for investors?
The Commission has looked at the need that banks have, a very legitimate need to be commercial organisations and to balance the interests and the needs of their customers and their shareholders. And it's very clear from some of the Commission's report that banks have not always got that balance right. Getting the balance right between customers and shareholders is critical to a successful and trustworthy banking industry. The best way to look after the long-term interests of shareholders is to make sure that you keep your customers, that you treat them well, and that you're able to grow your customer base with outstanding good behaviour.
One more question.
There's thousands of employees around Australia employed in the industry who haven't done anything wrong, who haven't ripped people off. How do you think they'd be feeling today?
Australian banks employ some 140,000 Australians, and many of them, I think, share the disappointment of every other Australian about what they've seen, sometimes in their own bank, sometimes in other banks, but nevertheless they feel impacted by the damage that does to the reputation of their industry. Ordinary Australians go to work in a bank every day, and just like everyone else, they want to be proud of what they do. So they have an interest, whether these matters have occurred in their bank or someone else's bank, they all have an interest in improving the trustworthiness of the entire banking industry so that every Australian can feel proud of their banks and to hold them up as among the best in the world.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.